What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. And today's video, I wanted to go through something very special to me, and that is learning how to do a handstand. Handstands are one of those fantastic things that, you know, for one, with the current situation with this quarantine and all that, it requires no equipment. You can literally do a handstand anywhere as long as you have some sort of stable floor. Number two, it's an incredibly fun thing to do and almost has endless possibilities around where you can go. There's always some way that you can level things up. So for those reasons and so many more, I wanted to create a more succinct version of my how to do a handstand tutorial video that I already have on this channel. I wanted to give you basically a reference video. I've made a lot of different videos on this channel about handstand training, how to get better at it, and I wanted to create a video which was kind of a central point that would reference off to all these different videos so you can find what is relevant to you and what you need to work on and have a look at the overall picture of training to achieve and learn the handstand. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Today's video is going to be made up of 5 different steps, and these steps can be considered your kind of steps up towards that end goal of achieving the handstand. So we're going to work from absolutely nothing all the way up to being able to hold a handstand itself. We're going to go through, first of all, a bunch of information. The information is important, and then we're going to finish up with the final step of how to actually go about applying that. Figure out where you're at, and then I'll help you apply it at the end of the video. All the resources I'm going to mention in today's video will be linked in the description down below, and also if you check out the description, there will be the link to my app Tribe. If you do want some specific guidance, some actual programs to follow, then you can do so in there. Otherwise, just pay attention to what is mentioned in this video, and hopefully you should end up in the same end goal. Right, so step number one is kind of the most important thing, and that is building capacity. Whenever we do any sort of sporting or physical activity, we need to understand that we have the physical capacity to do the act itself. So here's what you're going to want to have in place for when you're starting out your handstand journey, and you're going to build up along the way. Number one is looking after these guys, the wrists. The wrists are one of the most important things when it comes to the handstand and being able to do the handstand long term. We want to keep these guys healthy. We used to be able to put weight onto our feet. That is what they're made for. These feet are made for walking. But the wrists themselves aren't necessarily used to having our entire body weight placed onto them. So it's very important that we make sure that these are conditioned, they're strong, and they're ready to deal with that load that we're about to get put on them. So for this, I would just recommend my wrist routine, which again, I've made an entire video on, so that will be linked in the description down below. Start with that wrist routine. I would use it 1 as a warm up for your handstand sessions, and 2 as a cool down for your handstand session. That makes sure we get enough volume, enough stimulus there to help encourage the wrists. After they're warmed up, after we use it as a cool down, that's probably enough work combined with the fact that we're actually going to be doing handstands, which will make them stronger in general. Those two things together will make sure that we gradually strengthen our wrists over time. The second thing just to think about would be to not go full ham straight away. Don't do every single day straight away, because if we go from 0 to 100, that is when we increase the likelihood of injury. If we gradually increase it over time, that's going to help reduce our risk of injuries. Simple. Point number 2 for capacity is shoulder flexibility. Now, the shoulder flexibility is really fundamental for handstands. You can consider the shoulders the equivalent of the hips for us standing. The shoulders are for the hands, and they are maybe more important long term in handstands. We want to have nice, open, and also strong shoulders. So if you haven't got flexible shoulders, something you definitely want to work on. So again, like the rest of this video, there is a link in the description to my overhead shoulder flexibility routine, and that one works on the core principles that we need to do to develop shoulder flexibility. You need to 1, strengthen up the traps, strengthen up the shoulders in that shoulder flexion position. Number 2, we need to stretch out some of the muscles that are going to limit our overhead position. Those are going to include primarily the lat. We're also going to look at the teres major, and then maybe a little bit of the pec as well. So that routine kind of covers that one. And also, just in case you are here and you want to get a straight handstand, which a lot of people do have that end goal, I'll also link to the video I've made on why your handstand isn't straight, because the shoulders play a really important part of that. Point number 3 for building up general capacity with the handstand is finger strength. So this kind of goes along the same lines as the first one, building up that wrist strength. But here is when we get to start to introduce that balance element, which is so fundamental for handstands. We need to be strong in the fingers, especially in kind of a weird extended position that we wouldn't necessarily be strong in. It's very different to traditional grip training. And just the same as earlier, our feet, we've spent plenty of time on them. They've got pretty strong at being able to control our balance. We need to do the same thing with the hands and just teach them how to balance and how to do the work that our feet are used to be doing. And one of the best progressions for this at a very beginner level is simply the frog stand. Now the frog stand is just balancing basically on the elbows. And then you also have its slightly more advanced brother, which is the crow stand. Now, the main difference between those two is one is bent arm and one is straight arm. Both these positions are going to place all of your body weight onto your wrists, and it's also going to require you to balance in that position. The nice thing about this though is because our center of mass is so low to the ground, it's significantly easier to balance than say a handstand, but it is going to help teach us the awareness that we need in our fingers to be able to balance the handstand and also build up some strength there so that we have more control, and then again it's going to support our future handstand development. Simply spending some time trying to balance, trying to hold this position will be plenty of work just to get things going and start understanding that concept more. The final point, number 4, for the general capacity, the beginner sort of steps to making sure you're ready to start doing handstands, is just building up some general physical preparation in the shoulders. The first one is the pike handstand. Now this is going to start to get us into the position where we're placing more and more load onto our hands. We're going to get into that overhead position, which is so crucial for the handstand, but we're going to have our feet resting on an object that's going to take some of the weight off it and help reduce that intensity. It's also not going to have any real chance of falling over, so it's going to take that element out of it. We're going to get onto that one later. Again, we can hold this position for 10, 20, up to 60 seconds just to build some capacity, some strength in the shoulders and the traps for our handstand work. When this one gets a little bit easier, we can begin to work on something called the wall plank. So the wall plank is just taking and developing that pike handstand position, but we're going to be doing it close to that chest to wall handstand position. We're going to just walk up the wall, and we're simply going to walk as far as we feel comfortable. If you're comfortable enough to go all the way to that flat chest to wall handstand, fantastic. We're going to work there. That's actually the next progression. If you feel like you're going to fall, or if you not feel comfortable yet, don't feel strong enough, we're just going to walk partly up the wall, and obviously the closer you get to vertical, the harder this progression becomes. We can focus on just holding this position, pushing nice and tall through the shoulders, keeping that body line solid. When we get more comfortable with this, when we get stronger, when we get happier being upside down, we can work on doing the full chest to wall handstand. And again, just building up some time in this position, getting the shoulders stronger, getting comfortable being upside down. The fourth and final drill is not to do with the shoulders, but is in fact to do with the core. That is the hollow body. Now, whilst the core is not a particularly important part of the handstand, if you are strong enough to stand up, then you have a strong enough core to stand in a handstand. The only difference is that our hips are much, much stronger than our shoulders. So we need to build up strength there, but it can help just to build some more awareness and just some general understanding of building body tension. We can do a little bit of core work, and the one for that is essentially going to be the hollow body. So this involves holding a active kind of body position with our body as spread out as long as possible, with a slight hollow through the center of the body, which also involves some posterior pelvic tilt. I will link to just a video tutorial on holding this, but again, we can hold it for that 10, 20, up to 60 seconds, just to build a little bit of capacity and understanding of what body tension means. Don't go overkill on this one. The main focus should be on the shoulders. So that is the general capacity of handstands. We need to have strong wrists, we need to have flexible and strong shoulders, we need to build up some finger strength, and we need to just generally build up some capacity in the shoulders about being upside down. Once we've got this out of the way, this will be the first part of anybody's handstand training. We come to the next part, which is often the hurdle that a lot of people come to and prevents them from getting on further in their handstand journey, and that is step number 2, which is confidence. When I'm talking about confidence, I'm simply talking about the ability and confidence to chuck yourself upside down and try to attempt to hold the handstand position. For a lot of people, this isn't an issue to begin with. You will just do it and you'll have no problem with it. However, some people really do get stuck at this hurdle, and without addressing it, it's going to limit their future progression in general, because they'll always be afraid of essentially falling on your face and hurting yourself, which isn't unrealistic when you're starting to learn how to handstand. Just because it is a likely outcome doesn't mean that we can't learn how to avoid it. You might hurt yourself along the way. It's very, very unlikely to be that dramatic if you're sensible enough. What I do recommend you do is simply learn how to bail from a handstand. If you understand how to fall, it's never really going to be a problem that you might fall, because you understand how to do it. So again, I've got an entire video dedicated to how to bail out of the handstand. I'll link that one down below. If this applies to you, check that one out. Make sure you have that down. Make sure you feel confident, because if you don't, it will limit your steps later on. Make sure you have that one covered. Step number 3, the most important one really when it comes to learning the handstand, and that is balance. Balance, especially when learning how to do the handstand, does not mean just blindly kicking up to handstand, trying to catch it, failing, repeating. over and over again. This isn't an efficient way to learn how to handstand. It is a way to learn how to handstand, but it isn't efficient. The reason for that is time. Time is the most important factor when we're learning a skill, learning a new skill. We need to have lots of exposure to it. Randomly kicking up in the middle of the floor or wherever, we might get glimpses of balance, 1 second here, 1 second there. You know, in a session, we might get 5 seconds of total balance, if that. This is going to result in very slow progress, but there is one way we can speed things up, and that is by using the wall. The holy grail, the wall, is really your friend when you're learning how to balance. The wall allows us just to simply get much more time in that balanced position. It allows us to shortcut all of the other stuff, the kicking up, the falling out, the trial and the error, and it allows us just to focus on being in handstand and trying to spend as much time as possible balancing. Whether that is done chest to wall or back to wall, both develop different things. Chest to wall just teaches you how to develop balance. Back to wall is also going to teach you how to understand overbalance. That's when you're going to fall over, and it also helps to strengthen up the fingers a little bit more. I've got actually full videos on both of these drills, and I'll just link to that video down below, how to use the wall properly, because if you want to get a handstand, doing this on the wall will make your progress much faster and much more efficient. Just be prepared to drop the ego a bit and just stick to the wall, do it, do your time there, and then you can progress to bigger and better things. So with those two videos in mind, you should be pretty set when it comes to properly using the wall to learn how to balance, and then later on understanding how to balance in free space. Okay, now we've moved on. At this point, we should be, you know, comfortable being upside down. We should have spent some time getting the wrist strong. The shoulder should be a little bit more flexible and open. We should be on the wall, and we're getting glimpses of that 5-10 seconds of balance. It's exciting times. Now we need to string some things together, and we need to be able to do it in the floor. The nice thing about the wall is that we're already upside down. We're already in that starting point to find ourselves in handstand. When we're doing it freestanding or wherever we are, we need to understand how to enter the handstand. And the main way we're going to do that is by kicking up into the handstand itself. We can also do it through jumping up or pressing up, but the most consistent, the easiest way to do things is going to be through the standard kick up. The entry to handstand is a skill in itself. Learning to balance the handstand is one thing, learning to enter it is another thing. So we need to spend, you know, a decent amount of time actually just educating ourselves on how to kick up into handstand. Again, probably no surprise here, I've done an entire video on how to kick up and how to train the kick up to handstand pretty effectively. Again, using the wall. The wall is your friend, so I'll link to that video down below if you're struggling with that one. But essentially, kicking up does end up being a little bit of trial and error, and then over time, you understand how to refine the process and you get closer. If you're constantly trying to kick up and you constantly fail in the same way, reflect on that and try to make it so that next time you try, you kick up and you fall in the opposite way. So if you're always falling back onto your feet, the next time you try to kick up over. And then that way you've trained both sides of the coin, and eventually those two sides will get closer together and you'll find that nice holy grail middle point, which is kicking up into balance. This one's frustrating, but it's just part of the process. Presuming you've gone through all these steps, now you should be at the point in which you have a handstand, in theory anyway. The nice thing about these steps is, you know, I guess they're kind of short and succinct for what could potentially be a complicated thing to learn, the handstand. It's by no means something that happens overnight. But what we need to understand is how we can go about and apply this and actually use it. So that's what step number 5 is. How do you go about applying all of this stuff I've just rambled about for the past 10 minutes? So applying it is really the hard bit, because there's many different ways in which you can skin this cat, so to speak. If you just want to get stuck into it and get going straight away, one thing I would recommend is my 20-minute follow along handstand routine. That's a super simple routine. It covers a lot of the topics that we've discussed in this video, but you literally have to press play and just do what I say, and it kind of works out. I feel like for handstands though, just following along, just going through the motions doesn't necessarily end up with the best results. You need to put some thought and consideration into what you're doing to actually make some decent progress with it. The most important thing with applying it is making sure you get enough time doing the skill. And this is actually going to come down to mostly frequency of doing it. You're going to want to train the handstand at least 4 to 6 times per week. It's a highly neurological skill. It's going to need that constant repetition. It doesn't need to be super long sessions at first. It doesn't need to be to failure all the time. You just need to spend more and more time trying to do the handstand, trying to balance the handstand. And I do have a video again on this, which is about how many times and how often a week should you train the handstand. So I'll link that down below rather than go into full detail here. But essentially, 4 to 6 times per week is a fantastic place to start. More isn't always better if we again think about taking time to condition the wrists. We don't want to go from 0 to 100, but certainly 4 times a week, 30 minutes or so is a great place to start. So we've got, a time set aside to do handstands. What exactly should we do in that time? And that is the hard bit. So we've got essentially 4 different steps here. We've got the general capacity, we've got the confidence part, we've got the balance part, we've got the entry part. If you can't hold a chest to wall handstand for 30 seconds, you want to spend more time in your session on the capacity part. You want to build up more strength, more time, more capacity in the handstand itself, so you can actually spend a decent amount of time doing the handstand session. This should develop pretty quickly, to be honest, and you can soon move on to that balance portion. But just certainly if you can't do 30 seconds, just spend some time conditioning. Step number 2, if the confidence part is a big limiting factor for you, make sure you set aside 10-15 minutes each session. Just start getting used to the bailing out, trying to get used to understanding how to get more confident, being upside down. That will partly come from the capacity work, getting stronger, doing more handstand stuff, being upside down more. That in itself is gonna help build that confidence upside down, but also we need to drill how to bail, how to essentially not fuck yourself up. So if that's an issue for you, make sure you're working that. Otherwise, I would make sure you're dedicating a massive portion, in fact, a majority of the training session to understanding balance. I don't like to think of this in terms of sets. I do often prescribe sets, but the end goal we want to think about is time in balance. We might set the goal instead of accumulating 30, 60 seconds of balance in a session. That might take us 10 sets of 3 seconds of balance each time to get 30 seconds, or it might take us 2 sets of 15 seconds. If you can do 15 seconds of balance, you're probably going to want to aim for more than 30 seconds. Sets don't matter so much, we just want time. That is the absolute fundamental key. Having a good mixture of back to wall and chest to wall will work perfectly, but just have that focus on building time. And each time you have a session, try to maybe add a few more seconds to what you did last time. Next, we have adding in the entry. This is something I wouldn't worry about initially. I would just focus on getting more balance, getting more time in the handstand. Once you can start to hold the odd 5 seconds here, the odd 10 seconds here off the wall, that is the point in which I personally would start to learn how to kick up into handstand. And again, I would just add 10-15 minutes at the end of your sessions, working on that skill independently, using the videos that I've already linked in the description to work on the kick up itself. And to be honest, that is it. Handstands are just very frustrating, and a lot of the time people don't give it the time and the consistency to actually make some decent progress with it. It is going to take 3, 6, maybe more months to get a decent handstand that is consistent at holding. But providing you go through these steps, providing you build the capacity, providing you work on balance, especially on the wall, and using the tips in the other videos I've linked, I don't see why you shouldn't have some decent success with learning to handstand. And with the current time being stuck inside, there's really no better time to learn how to do it. It's the sort of thing that once you learn it, you pretty much have it for life. It's a fun skill to do. Again, if you want some specific advice on this one, I recommend checking out my app Try. We have 8 handstand routines in there from 0 to some form of level of balance and beyond. So again, I'd highly recommend that one. Whilst you're down in the description, make sure you check out all of the other links because there is a shitload of videos down there. But that is basically it for this week, guys. If you enjoyed this video, if you found this video useful, you know what to do. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button and support the channel, support that YouTube algorithm. If you have any questions at all about this one, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to answer who I can, and other members of the tribe will also be able to answer your questions. If you're down there and you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe. Don't miss out on any more future videos and just all the other stuff we get up to on this channel. But that has basically been it for this week, guys. I'll catch you in the next episode. Have a strong week and